What's shaking there, guys? Today's Memorial Day, as you know. Um, Pretty special day, holding the fallen in memory. But, I was actually doing some research and I was looking at Memorial and Veterans Day. And Memorial Day, originally, it's a very old holiday. It's from the Civil War, and it was initially called Decoration Day. And it was a day where everyone, because it was in spring and all the flowers were blooming, everybody would go out and cut flowers and decorate soldiers and decorate graves, adorn graves. And it was considered kind of an act of, it's like reunification, that peace, there was peace, that the combat had been called off, the war was over, and they were trying to promote harmony between the North and the South and the reunification. And they changed that, I think, after World War II, to encompass, because it wasn't just about the war between the states, the Northern War of aggression, as the Southerners say. But I also wanted to touch on this contemptible hatred for um, this Southern heritage, or it's almost hard to put because they were the enemy of the United States. They were a confederacy, a confederate, a group of Confederates breaking away from the Union. But as men, it wasn't just breaking away from the Union. They were willing to fight and die for something. And people, they do this hand waving of they fought for slavery, and that's just not true. People people don't die like people aren't willing to go die for something like that. Slavery, that institution, and like the percentage of people that owned slaves was so small, it was ridiculous. Um, so that's not why people were going and fighting, and it just bothers me uh, how people conflate that. The Southerners, they had a way of life. They were fighting for their way of life. They were fighting for what they thought was right. And there's a reason why we still teach about General Lee and why we talk about the South, because although the South really didn't hasn't ever contributed or never really contributed very much invention wise, prosperity wise. I mean, they produced a lot of cotton, produced a lot of clothing for the world. But other than that, they didn't. They just it was just an agrarian society, an agrarian culture, and they were willing to die for that and their way of life and their to protect their and it was a point of principle for them, but much more, so much so that they were willing to shed hundreds of thousands of young men's blood on the battlefield. And and I just think that the South is owed a little bit. They were they are Americans, and they were the brothers of the Union. They were brothers, and they deserve respect. The South deserves respect for the valor and the honor and the gallant. With they deserve the respect for which they deserve our respect for the honorable way that they prosecuted that war. They were honorable men. They were God-fearing men. They were honorable men. And they weren't ruffians. They weren't a rabble. They weren't. It wasn't a riot. They weren't anarchists. They were God-fearing men. They were, productive men. And so, and I'm not here. I'm not. I don't want to judge those men of that time. It's a totally different time, but I do want to respect their willingness to sacrifice for the greater good, and they deserve respect for that too. But I just really to me I live in Florida, but I'm not. My parents weren't born in Florida. Uh, So I'm not a, I don't have Southern heritage in my gene pool. But I do still identify as a Southerner now, I guess you would say. I've lived here literally my entire life. But, I also sympathize with the cause. They thought they were fighting a tyranny, and to them, I'm sure it was a tyranny. And they lost. To the victor goes the spoils. That's that, That's that. Glad the Union won, but I also respect the South for standing on principle. Because if like at least they stood for something. At least they took a position, and it was a hard line position as well. When you think about it, they were willing to sacrifice much for the positions they took. But also just wanted to, talk about Memorial Day, as it were. I have a lot of my family was in the military. My dad was a Marine. My grandfather was a Marine. My other grandfather was a major in the Air Force. My grandfather that was in the Marine Corps, his brother was retired from the Marines as a master sergeant. And I think the American military has brought us some really great stuff, and they've really they've brought a lot of good things to American culture. They bring a lot of good values. Discipline, and but not only that, but the way we do things is colored by our military past, and the way that we feel about things is colored by our military past. And so, in that respect, the military is also a huge part of what makes America America. And another thing, also, and I know this is a concept that people know about, but the civilian soldier, the citizen soldier, I've always respected. My dad always respected the fact that we don't we keep a very small professional army, and the wars that we've won, the major wars that we've won, were conscription based. Or unless before pre Civil War they weren't, but and that was even better because then you had people that were, they were regular Joes and they were willing to take up the cause of liberty, take up arms and fight on behalf of liberty, fight on behalf of freedom, and I do think that's special. But also, even with the draft, it's more or less just a formal way of doing it. Because World War II, a draft was not necessary. People were felt unlucky if they got what was it, 1F or 4F. When you weren't A1 or you were F1 or F4 or something. But you couldn't. It means you didn't qualify for the draft and you had to stay here, and it was a mark. It was a stain on your name that you didn't go fight. It was either there was something wrong with you, or you were a coward. Pretty much. Pretty much. So or you'd have to explain yourself because some people did arms manufacturing and stuff. But the fact that we don't use professional armies really, a lot, and it's all volunteer now. It's always been that way. Regular Americans have always been willing to fight on behalf of freedom, because our culture has placed value and priority on that liberty. So I think I do think that having Memorial Day and Veterans Day is a really great thing because we should pay homage to these things. These are good things. They lead to prosperity. So it's just something I've been thinking about, and I figured whenever I'm chewing on something, eventually I have to make a video of it just to kind of get it out of my head.